The Tier 0 format is in full effect, and that is leaving many budget players scrambling to find out what deck they would like to be using in this fire format. Now, although there are many decks that are available over the counter, a lot of these decks still hold a high premium just to be able to use them without a full extra deck. And today's video is a special one, and not only because we get to have a little bit of a remedy for the budget players out there, but also because it is our 100th video on the channel. So I'd like to give a special thanks out there to all the viewers helping us along the way, and all the ones we're going to be having in the future watching this content. So this one's for you. And also, since it is the 100th video, we're going to be sneaking in a little bit of a market watch at the very end, just a little bit of snippet so it doesn't take too much time for those that love the market watches out there. I know who you guys are and I super appreciate you guys, but let's get right into the video. And now we begin the fun, because this deck is not only very budget friendly, but it is a video that we actually did as our second video on the channel, and that is none other than Nurse Burn. And now, a lot of players out there might be familiar with what Nurse Burn does, but for those who are not, Nurse Burn is essentially a deck that uses a bunch of cards to increase your opponent's life points, but with the twist that when you have your boss monster, the Nurse Reticule, on the board, that all that increasing turns into decreasing and inflicts the damage directly to their life points. And now, not only is Nurse Burn actually a budget-conscious deck, but it is extremely friendly to newer players of the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Not only that, but Nurse Burn, as many players know, has a reputation for being very dangerous to be dueling against. The basic kind of summary of what the deck is especially trying to do: summoning out the Nurse Reticule and then activating multiple cards that increase the opponent's life points, hitting that nice 8,000 mark, bringing it down to 0. And you can actually do this combo lines such as double gift card, as well as a Paths of Destiny. If they're playing an extra deck that you are familiar with, try and guess gift card and Paths combo is actually another path to be able to get there. If you open up the Nurse and be able to summon it, activate a couple Upstart Goblins, and then maybe even have 2 of the 3,000 trap cards, that again is another path to the victory of 8,000 burn damage. And now, when we debut this Nurse Burn deck, we're going to be starting with the budget version of this deck for the budget conscious players out there. And honestly, when we totaled up this deck, it was ranging under or about $60. It really just depends on what kind of side deck cards you want to go into, but this is a very budget conscious deck. And again, a lot of the most expensive cards are in things like the gift card. And then for the players that are extremely interested in this deck and maybe want to play it on a sim and kind of take it to the higher tier events perhaps, then we're actually going to have some of the cards that you would actually want to include in this deck if you had a little bit more of a budget to kind of be thrown around for decks like Nurse Burn. But enough of the theory, let's get right into the actual deck list of the Nurse Burn. And now, unlike the second video we actually posted up, this is not a Condemned Witch Nurse Burn deck. This is actually a Dark Lord Nurse Burn deck, because yes, Dark Lord Nurse Reticule has that name change, allowing it to be in the Dark Lord archetype. Even though we run 3 of the Dark Lord Nurse Reticule, the Dark Lord archetype actually adds a ton of consistency to the deck when you run cards such as 3 Banishment of the Dark Lords, which allows you to add any Dark Lord card from the deck to the hand, or 3 of the Dark Lord Ixchel. And now I might be pronouncing that name incorrectly. It's a weird one, but it is the Dark Lord that allows you to pitch any other Dark Lord in your hand to draw 2 cards from the deck. And now I know these are once per turn abilities, whether for the Dark Lord spell card or for the draw 2, but both are going to be played at 3 in this version for consistency of opening them, as well as when we follow up with our spell cards, we are playing 3 Potted Desires. And now, with Potted Desires actually being at 3 and quite a budget-friendly card, we're seeing it be a great addition in this deck. Following suit is another pot card that honestly doesn't get a lot of play outside of Fluunderies, and that is Pot of Duality at 3. With that excavation, half the time, that might actually be the difference between you grabbing that final combo piece that you need for that Nurse Burn combo. And then, kind of like Pot of Desires coming back to 3, an old friend actually came back to 3, and that is Upstart Goblin. And now, Upstart Goblin and Nurse Burn go hand in hand. If you have the nurse on the board and you activate Upstart Goblin, not only you get another draw, but your opponent is taking 1,000 points of damage. And if that isn't an upgrade of the card, I don't know what is. And then our last three cards are some very powerful ones, with the first one being card destruction. Not only can it serve as a potential interruption, but honestly, what we're really using it for is to dig a little bit deeper in the deck. Maybe we have a couple combo pieces we want to swap out for a few others, and card destruction is going to be that card that adds that extra little bit of consistency to the build. And now the second one is actually one a lot of players are unfamiliar with, and that is Contract with Dawn 1000. And now this is kind of a makeshift Upstart Goblin, where when you activate this continuous spell, both players take 1,000 life point damage as well as drawing a card. And now there is an added interesting effect with Dawn 1000's Contract, and that is anytime a player draws a card when this card is active, those cards are actually revealed. And then if a spell card is revealed in a player's hand, that player is unable to normal summon while that spell card is revealed. So if your opponent is unable to set those spells face down or simply unwilling to, they're not going to be able to perform the normal summon for the turn with any revealed spell cards in the hand. And then the last spell card is honestly probably the most powerful of them all, and that is Card of Demise. And this essentially lets you refresh your hand going back up to a maximum of 3, and a lot of the times if this card is resolved, you normally do proceed with a victory afterwards. And now, as we know, the traps are probably the most important part of this deck, simply because they are the ones that are going to be increasing your opponent's life points the most, and that is with cards such as 3 Gift Card. And now that's obviously the easy choice, being able to deal 3,000 points of damage to the opponent while you have your nurse on the board. And then following suit is almost an equally important card, and that is Try and Guess. Now, Try and Guess can be as good as Gift Card, but that's because if each player has an extra deck, you get to declare 1 extra deck monster card. And that is basically between Fusion, Synchro, or Exceeds. And then both players reveal their extra deck, and the player who has more cards of the declared type gain 3,000 life points. So, since this card was actually printed before Links and Pendulums, they're specifically not on this card. So if you're actually playing an extra deck of all links and you're playing against anyone who's playing Fusion, Synchro, or Exceeds, you are instantly able to make sure that they're opted into gaining that 3,000 life points. And as we know, especially in the current metagame, a lot of players are opting into either the Exceeds, some Fusion tech, something that is actually able to be used against them with that Try and Guess trap card. And as a lot of players probably guessed it, our entire extra deck is all links. Now, the next trap card, and also another one at 3, is the Paths of Destiny trap card. Paths of Destiny essentially allows both players to flip a coin, and then whoever gets heads gains 2,000 life points, whoever gets tails loses 2,000. But again, as long as you have nurse on the board, your opponent is taking 2,000 no matter what. And now, some traps that add a little bit of interruption as well as a lot of burn are traps such as Ichiroku's Ledger Book, and we actually do play that at 3 in this build. And now, unlike a lot of newer cards, this card is not limited to a once per turn effect, and you can actually target up to 2 monsters your opponent controls, and then you banish them. And then for each card that is banished by this card effect, your opponent will gain 1,000 life points. So you have a potential of burning them for up to 2,000 life point damage. And then on top of that, you are banishing 2 monsters off your opponent's board per ledger copy. So you can actually deal massive damage to your opponent while maintaining a constant state of interruption, ensuring they do not proceed with any of their combos. Now, following suit is another card with some interruption and burn, and that is Ring of Destruction. And now, even though Ring of Destruction has been eroded and isn't as strong as it used to be, it is still a great option in the Nurse Burn deck. And then the other nice thing about the Ledger, as well as the Ring of Destruction, is that when your opponent is actually going first and puts up Omni Negates like Baron, you're actually able to use the Ledger or the Ring of Destruction to bait out that negate, so then even if you have the OTK burn, there isn't a negate to stop it. And now, to wrap up the deck with the last 2 traps, the first one is Bad Reaction to Smochi, and essentially it is a continuous trap that is a makeshift version of Nurse Reficule, so that anytime your opponent would gain life points, they are actually losing the amount instead as an inflicted damage. And then the last card on the list is Trap Trick. And honestly, this card has added a ton of consistency to the Nurse Burn deck overall, with Trap Trick being able to copy all the most important important traps in the deck, whether that's the interruption or the combo line itself, is adding a ton of success to Nurse Burn, and is why we are including that at 3 in this deck. And now guys, that is the budget version of the Nurse Burn deck. We're also going to be going over a little bit later some techs you can definitely be putting in this deck if you're able to drop a little bit more of a budget into it. Maybe you want to take it to some higher level events and have some real trolling fun, but we're going to be mentioning that in a little bit here. But let's go over the budget side deck right now. And now, whether you're a budget player or not, the first cards are definitely cards I would be playing in this side deck, especially when you end up going second. And that is 2 of the Thunder King Lightning Strike Kaiju, as well as the Star Destroying Kaiju at 1. And honestly, you can go 2-1 on any of the numbers, as long as you're running 3 with a 3300 attack. That is all you really got to be focusing on. The reason these cards are so key, especially in the budget version, again, we are maining Ring of Destruction. So if you were going second and they put up an Omni Negate, maybe even a Baron, you're able to Kaiju it onto their board, and then on the following turn, that will be a trap card that blows up the Kaiju and inflicts 3300 points of damage to them, and will definitely help you succeed in the future of the Nurse Burn combo line. After that, we get into some more meta warping cards, such as Evenly Matched, simply because Evenly Matched has become such a staple between the trap trick structure or even the rarity collection. So now a lot of budget players are actually able to obtain Evenly Matched at a very cheap rate. And then following suit with that trap line is cards such as Solemn Judgment. Holding on to that Solemn Judgment, waiting to have your combo line set up, flip up your trap cards, burn for game, and the moment they play anything for that interruption that they've been waiting to play, you activate Solemn Judgment, and as soon as that chain resolves, it is GG. And then some tech other players are playing are cards such as Grave Digger's Trap Hole, simply because you can actually stop a hand trap from resolving, or maybe even cards in the graveyard are banished. But I have not actually included it in my side deck, but I did want to mention it here. But another budget card you can include is a card like Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. Now, the next one on today's list is actually kind of a personal favorite, and that is Blazing Metaphors. And now I know it might not be the first choice for a lot of players, but even though it looks rough on paper, Blazing Metaphors within testing and playing has actually shown a ton of success. And then the last couple cards you can actually be side decking is things like Inspector Border if you want to go with the more of a bad reaction Samochi route. We even have cards like Messenger of Peace, or even the newly popular Synchro Zone. So if you want to be blocking them out of attacks and leave your monster zones open for your nurse, these are amazing options to choose from. And now I know this is a budget deck, and definitely isn't going to be getting you that nice 12-0 swift victory in all the YCSs, but I want to just kind of reiterate, it is definitely a budget deck. But especially if you win that die roll and going second, siding properly, you can absolutely be pulling out these wins, especially at your OTS tournaments. Get a few wins, obtain more of those OTS packs, and then hopefully pull some of those OTS ultimates to up your overall value. Now, for the non-budget players out there that are extremely interested in the Nurse Burn deck, we actually do have a few tech cards I would definitely like to mention that make this deck extremely consistent. And now simply, they're the 2 cards that a lot of players are very familiar with, and that is Triple Tactics Talent, as well as Triple Tactics Thrust. Now, I would definitely recommend 2 Talents and 3 Thrust in this build overall, and that is because essentially Thrust will be adding almost any of your important combo pieces that you might be missing for that burn aspect, or all of the draw options you could possibly be looking for in the deck. Not only can it search the Dark Lord spell card, but it can also search any of your pot cards, or if you're actually able to bait the opponent into ashing your Dark Lord draw 2, or even your Pot of Desires, you can then use the Thrust to add your Card of Demise, which honestly, if you're able to resolve Card of Demise, especially after they've already wasted their Ash, you are definitely golden to be going in for that OTK on the following turn. So Triple Tactics Thrust is a must if you're going to be taking this to a super competitive event, because honestly, there are too many interruptions to just kind of be risking it at these higher events that your opponent doesn't have something for your OTK. And then for the extra deck, I want to say for the budget version, you just take 15 links It doesn't matter what links they are, the cheapest ones you can literally get put in a sleeve if you really want to, and get it in your deck box, okay? Because with Try and Guess, you're gonna be basically not included in that selection, okay? You want to make sure if you call the Synchros, the Fusions, or the Exceeds, you want to make 100% sure that your opponent has more than you. And with some decks kind of teching one or two, even if you're running a few Fusions just for like a super poly target, that might be enough to make sure that Try and Guess backfires. And if you'd like that Nurse Burn video, do drop that sub. But now we gotta cater a little bit to the market watchers. Now we're going to be keeping it very brief, but the first card on the mini market watch is none other than Stygian Dirge, the Lost Art promotion. And yes, we talked about this in an earlier video and even hinted to it in the last video if you ended up going and seeing the Twitter. Did you? But Lost Art Stygian Dirge has had more copies actually released to TCG player that are extremely affordable. So less than $2 or less than $3 if you end up buying from a single seller, you're actually able to pick up a single copy of the Lost Art promo. And again, as we know, the commons were much higher nearly a year ago. So it is only a matter of time until these ultra rare Lost Art promos are higher than $2 to $3. And then wrapping up the mini market watch for those still sticking around, and I love those of you who do, it is Downward Magician for the quarter century secret rare. And this card has seen an increase of like $1.50. It was like $5-6, but now we're sitting at about $7 a piece, a little bit less. Okay, so this is actually a pretty good price point if you actually recall what the secret rares of this card were, even though we even had some reprints. So it is only a matter of time until the quarter century secret rares of Downward Magician do see a spike in price. But guys, that is the 100th video today with the Nurse Burn deck list as well as the mini market watch. So if you got anything from the video, or if you have found your way back to the channel before, do drop that subscribe. Our numbers are shooting up and we very much appreciate it. But as always, we're going to have videos flashing up to be checking out. But most importantly, I want to thank each and every one of you out there for keeping the channel going, even though sometimes I can get a little spicy. But honestly, I'm hoping everyone out there has been enjoying the content, and I'm looking forward to many more videos with all of you. But as always, guys, stay safe, have a good night, and suck it, nerds.